Okay, just to finish up these notes, aka part two, the product theorem says that when you have, and this is in polar form, okay, so if you remember from the previous section, this is what polar form looks like, okay? So in polar form, if you have two numbers, r1 cosine of theta 1 plus I sine of theta 1 times r2 cosine of theta 2 plus I sine of theta 2. Okay? When you multiply them, they multiply together and then they end up equaling this. Basically, the r1 and the r2 gets multiplied together. And then inside here, you have the cosine of theta 1 plus theta 2 plus I sine of theta 1 plus theta 2. Okay? So before we do the quotient theorem, I'm going to show you guys what that means. So here, these are two polar form um, uh, polar forms of complex number, two trig forms, and we want to find each product in rectangular form. So going back to single, either imaginary or real number, so a plus bi. Okay? So here are my r's. So first off, I'm going to multiply the r's. So 4 times 5 times. Now the cosines, the two thetas for cosine are going to get added together. So it's 30 plus 120. And then plus I. And then the sines, the two thetas of the sines are going to get added together. So 30 plus 120. So this just becomes 20 times cosine of 150 plus I sine of 150. Alright, so you can put this, sorry, 1 second, computer is acting on. Alright, so coming back to this, so we got 20 cosine of 150. I'm not remembering my little, my, no, my calculator. I'm not remembering my unit circle right now. So cosine of 150 and sine sine of 150 is 1/2 cosine of 150 -3 square root of 2. Okay. That took a little bit. It's okay. So cosine of 150, negative 3 square root of 2 plus I. Sine of 150 is 1/2. And then you can distribute that 20, so you end up with negative 10 square root of 3 plus 10 I. And that right there is the product in rectangular form. Okay, sorry for the mini brain fart. Alright, the last thing is going to be the quotient theorem, and the quotient theorem is basically the same thing. If you have those two polar coordinates, r1 cosine of theta plus I sine of theta divided by r2 cosine of theta 2 plus I sine of theta 2, then your answer, you're doing the same exact thing, except what you're doing is r1 divided by r2, and then in here, cosine of the two thetas is going to be subtracted, the first being subtracted by the second, and still adding I sine of theta 1 minus theta 2. Alright, now I'm just going to start this, and we're not really going to finish it, just so that this video doesn't take too long. So this is division in polar trig form. I want to write it in rectangular form, which means A plus BI. So 16 divided by 8 is first, and then in here we have cosine of 300 minus 60 plus I sine of 300 minus 60. So 16 divided by 8 is 2. This is cosine of 240. Okay, plus I sine of 240. And so now 2, okay, cosine of 240 is negative 1/2 plus I sine of 240 is negative square root of 3 over 2. So this becomes negative 2 over 2, because I'm distributing, minus I 2 square root of 3 over 2. And then what happens to the 2's? You end up with negative 1 minus square root of 3I. Never forget the I. So this is in rectangular form. Alright, done with 10.4.